Hello, this is Mike Jacko with MNREA, Minnesota Real Estate Investors Association, with a weekly Flip It tip. And this week I want to talk about something that came up last night in our monthly premium members training. One of the students was saying what's holding him back is fear. He's got everything else set up. He's got his business set up. He's got his marketing set up. He's looked at some properties. He just hasn't made an offer. And I asked him what was holding him back, and he said fear. And we all know that that stands for false evidence appearing real, right? Well, in some cases, and actually probably in most cases, that's true. Fear does stand for false evidence appearing real. However, when it comes to real estate, it's not really false evidence. Sometimes it's real evidence appearing real. And the fear becomes, well, what if I paid too much for the property? Or if you're wholesale, or you can't rent it out for what you thought and you're not going to cash flow the property. You're making a big, huge financial commitment, or you're putting a lot of your money down. Or if you're a wholesaler, then the fear is, well, what if I don't find a buyer for it? Then, do I have to close on it? And if I do, how am I going to come up with the money or the financing? I can't do it, so what's going to happen? So we talked about last night is, especially for wholesalers, is using a little-known tool that's called an option. Now, everyone's heard of an option, but most people don't really understand what an option is and don't use them. And this is where I wanted to hit on what an option is and why to use them, and how that will alleviate the fear factor. It won't get rid of it, but it should ease it up a little bit for you. Actually, it could probably even completely get rid of it if you truly understand options. So let's look at a scenario as to where you would use an option. Let's say you've got a property where the ARV is $180,000, the seller wants $170,000, and you're not comfortable paying more than $150,000 because there's really no profit spread in there above that, even for wholesaling if you have to quick fire and quick sale the property. So what you can do is say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, you don't like my $140,000 offer, whatever. Let me get an option at the $170,000 that you want. Give me 90 days. Let me see what I can do with it. Give me time to do my due diligence, run it by some investors, my partners, say run it by my consultants, by whoever you want to say you're going to run it by. Or you can even be honest with them and say, you know what, let me see if I can find a buyer that's willing to pay that. So give me 90 days. In fact, I just did that on a property in a much smaller price range where it's one of those situations where I'm probably going to end up letting that option expire because the price was too high for that area. So anyways, if the seller says, okay, well then you get an option. Now the option doesn't obligate you to buy, but it does obligate the seller to sell if you choose to exercise the option. And you'd only want to exercise the option if you found the buyer, or you did your due diligence and you found out, you know what, this does make sense and I'm going to go ahead and buy the property at that price. But if you don't decide to buy it at that price, or you don't find a buyer at that price, you can simply let the option expire, and there's no risk to you. Now the only thing is maybe a little bit of a financial risk. You might have to put up $10 or maybe $100 at the very most as an option consideration. And option considerations are non-refundable, no matter who you're giving them to. So if you're giving somebody $10 for an option consideration, at worst, you've got $10 to lose. Typically, I'm getting my options at zero. So I'm tying them up for 90 days, 60 to 90 days, depending on what the seller's comfortable with. And I've got nothing to lose because if I don't find a buyer for it, or if the numbers don't make sense and maybe I run it by a hard money lender and the hard money lender says, nope, won't work, you mess up on either your ARV or your repairs or whatever, I'm not going to fund this, well, then you just let your option expire. If you do choose to go ahead and buy it, maybe you find a buyer, or you get a hard money loan, or you get bank financing, or whatever, you make the decision to buy it, then you convert that option into a bona fide purchase and sales agreement, where then you are at risk because now you have to close on it or you suffer consequences. You can always back out, but there's liquidated damages. Typically got to have a little bit more of a down payment, but the option gives you the option to buy it or not. And if you choose not to buy it, you can simply let it expire and you just walk away from it. And that's one thing we're going to actually be talking about at next week's meeting for the MNREA main monthly meeting. We're going to be talking about the 5-day sales process and options are one of the tools we're going to be discussing on how to tie up some properties to use to do the 5-day sales process to help you build your buyers list, to find more seller leads, and potentially even sell these properties. So you could go out, get an option on a property at maybe a higher price than you're comfortable with, then do a 5-day sale on the property to see if it's going to work or not, if the numbers make sense. If it doesn't work, walk away from it. You've learned something, maybe picked up some buyers, maybe even picked up some new realtors, maybe even picked up new listings. Sellers or investors, maybe you picked up some subject to or some creative financing type of deals when you're talking to other sellers that are coming to these properties and look and say, hey, what's going on here? So we'll see you guys next Tuesday, September 1st.